All right. Let's give it just a second here, folks. Make sure we have a transmission. We live? All right. This is your host, Joe Imbriano, ladies and gentlemen, coming to you live from the sunny streets of Southern California on this Wednesday, April 5th, 2023. And I wanted to come to you this morning and kind of tie things together and untie some of the lies that have been wound up and put in front of everyone. This is your host, Joe Imbriano, the Fullerton Informer, P.O. Box 4121, Fullerton, California, 92834. On the web at thefullertoninformer.com, WiFiDangers.com, VaxDangers.com, CellTowerDangers.com, 5GDangers.com, and many other. Thank you for your continued prayers for this literal ministry of truth, folks. All right. So, I always open up the broadcast as of late with, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are on the face of this plane under the firmament, right? Well, there's a lot of things that are lies that have been taught to us so that we can't see the truth, folks. And, one of the greatest lies ever told, when I say one of the greatest lies ever told, is the shape of what we live on, folks, and what we live on, and how it's not some spinning ball that's got some red hot liquid magma and ocean on the top of it spinning at thousands of miles an hour, hurling through space at thousands of miles an hour, and yet the North Star just never moves, right? I want to tell you that a lot of things that you've been taught are lies, and it's by design. And it's no mystery that the weather and the weather models and the mechanisms by which things that we observe in nature operate are lies in terms of what we've been taught. Specifically, these tornadoes, folks. It's horrific where, I've been through the South. I know people who live in the South, and it's a tragic situation where simple people, getting by and trying to raise a family and, try to make an honest living, are having their lives literally turned into hell by weather modification, right? Because that's exactly what's going on. Now, what is happening is there are these massive storm systems and tornadoes spawning as a result of these storm systems. Or are they a result of these storm systems? Are these storm systems simply the cover for the creation of these tornadoes? Well, one of the things that you need to understand about everything that is going on is that there is a solid structure supporting waters above the earth, folks. That is not some archaic concept of the universe. That is a factual representation of a description of the design by Almighty God and the physical characteristics designed and created by Almighty God of what we live on and what we live under. Now, the implications of this, folks, are extremely important. Now, you need to understand what the implications of this are. Just a moment here. There are large weaponry systems that have been invented by your sons and daughters that have been sent off to quote-unquote school, to college, where your sons and daughters invent these weapons, folks, and they're trained to learn these theoretical applications of quote-unquote science and physics and mathematics so that they can quote-unquote create and invent things that ostensibly are for the furtherance and the benefit of mankind, which in reality are nothing more than the development of weaponry that is being used to further agendas, okay? And the number one agenda right now that's going live right now as we speak is the climate change agenda, which is a hoax. The real climate change is being accomplished through weather modification. And weather modification is an operation that's been underway for, literally 50 years, folks. They'd signed, the different countries all over the world had signed weather warfare treaties at least 50 years ago. They've owned the weather for 50 years, folks. Now, in case you haven't noticed, things like, aviation, the technology in aviation has been stagnant for 50 years. I mean, we're still using these jet engines and these jet aircraft. Same design, just a little more computers. But by and large, the principles of, I'm going to state something right here, you need to pay attention. The principles of things like levitation, okay, which is how jet aircraft operate. They operate by levitation. There's thrust involved. But by and large, they run on compressed air and levitation. Now, levitation is an important concept because levitation is accomplished through a variety of means, right? Levitation can be accomplished primarily through resonance, all right? And when you want to have a really simple example of resonance involving levitation, you can look at, I believe, insects in the phylum Hymenoptera, if you will, I guess bees, right? Bees and wasps, these things levitate, folks, and it's not from air displacement. It's from resonance, sound resonance, and resonance being piped through the chambers in the wings, okay? That's how the bees levitate. Okay? It's miraculous. It's through levitation that they can hover. They can literally make a 90-degree turn and stop midair. And, the wings, they hum, they buzz. Through resonance, right? Well, jet aircraft through resonance also can hover. Have you ever seen any on approach, right? They can levitate. So can physical objects being abducted into a torsion field called a tornado. Now, a lot of the weather warfare is being conducted through the use of something called scalar weapons, right? And scalar energy is a type of energy that a lot of people are not taught about, just like when you go to college, like I did, for science. I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a bachelor's degree in biological science. And so I was taught a lot of physics, calculus, and differential equations, and regular biology, cellular biology, microbiology, psychobiology, biochemistry, organic chemistry, physical chemistry, nuclear chemistry, right? Different levels of physics, and on it goes, right? But I was never taught something called magnetobiology, right? In other words, we learned all about how chemicals affect biology, but never about how magnetism affects biology. Well, a lot of you have never been taught about how magnetism and energy affects matter in ways, because a lot of you have never been taught that a lot of this energy and weaponry operates by bouncing off of the roof, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to repeat that. A lot of the weaponry that is in operation accomplishes its dirty, dastardly deeds of weather modification by being beamformed and bounced off of the firmament, folks. Now, did you know that almost all communications are terrestrial? That's right. Many of the things that you think are being relayed by satellites are literally being beamformed and bounced off of the firmament, off of the solid structure that supports the waters above us, folks. We're in a closed system. They use the roof for a lot of things. back when they were blowing up these bombs at, 50, 60, 70 miles up in the air, I think it was in the 50s, they were trying to energize the firmament so it would be a better propagator of signals. And consequently, that's when we had this so-called emergence of quote-unquote satellite technology, right? So what they have now is what they've done. I'll tell you real quick, folks. I've lived in Southern California my whole life, and I've made this statement before. I was going to be a weatherman when I got out of high school. I was going to become a meteorologist, but I didn't want to leave the beautiful Southern California area and the beaches and the fishing and the overall experience of living in probably the best weather in the world, right? So, but that didn't change my observational characteristics and habits of weather phenomenon. And even in the early 70s, mid 70s, late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, I was literally categorizing and cataloging barometric pressure readings, relative humidity, high and low temperature, wind directions, and speeds for probably about 25 years. I've written accounts of these things. And these written accounts were made with my own personal things like my own barometer and temperature gauge and things like that. I didn't have a wind gauge. I relied on the coastal weather information recording from the Sheriff's Harbor Patrol in Newport Beach for a lot of my wind speeds and confirmation of barometric pressure. But what I'm getting at is that the weather has changed drastically, okay? And the normal weather patterns that I observed as a child were very, very easy to predict in terms of when they arrived, what they would do, how long they would last, and what they would do when they departed, and the characteristics that were displayed in these weather phenomena, whether it be an offshore condition, a Santa Ana condition, an onshore flow, a Catalina eddy, a marine layer, a cold front, a cutoff low, or what they call an inside slider. We had all these different weather phenomena in Southern California, and for me, they're very easy to recognize because it was very important that I would recognize the weather pattern so I would be able to time when I would either take my boat out into the channel of between Long Beach and Orange County and Catalina Island, because my boats were pieces of junk and I wasn't able to take something out that wasn't seaworthy in rough seas. So I had to time it well, folks, but I knew the weather and I knew what was coming. And I also knew what kind of weather we would have for a season based on the performance of my fruit trees and their blossoms and their fruiting and the productivity or lack thereof. I knew what kind of a summer and spring and winter we were going to have. That's why I said to my wife, when the fall began last year, I said, we're going to have one heck of a wet winter, honey. I said, I don't care what they're telling us. We're in an El Nino pattern. We're not in a La Nina pattern. They're lying. So what's been done lately, folks? I'm going to break it down for you right now. All right, we had an interruption there. Okay, we back? Are we back? All right. We're back. Okay, good. All right, so they have dropped the jet stream, I would say probably 1,000 miles to the south for a good month and a half. All right, and that is accomplished through ionospheric heating and pressure gradients that are created by a combination of scalar weaponry and microwave weaponry that act on the air masses, and they can guide and steer. They can guide and steer the jet stream anywhere they want. Now, we've had consistent cold weather patterns making landfall over the southwestern United States for about 6 weeks, 8 weeks now. And they're lying about the barometric pressure readings. We've got literal, storms dumping water on us, and they're telling us that the barometer is 30.05 inches of mercury, right? And we've got these southeast winds, 20, 30 miles an hour, and there's no rain with them. The clouds are here. They're not dumping. And then all of a sudden it starts raining, and then we get a little bit of hail, and the barometer doesn't drop, right? And then when the storm system moves through, the barometer drops to like 30.0 or 29.98. Folks, that's ridiculous. Okay, they're lying about the barometric pressure readings. And they are manipulating the barometric pressure because that's how they move the jet stream around, okay? Now, what happened when they moved the jet stream to the south, they kept sweeping it to the south and keeping the warm air way away from meeting up with the jet stream. They're saying this was a Pineapple Express winter. They call these atmospheric rivers. Nonsense. This is nothing more than the manipulation of the jet stream's trajectory to make sure that cold air continues to bombard the southern United States so that it doesn't head north where it normally goes through, and it goes through the southern part of the United States, hooking up with the warmer air from the Gulf to create these horrific storms, which by themselves dump a tremendous amount of water because all of that moisture gets released. But what ends up happening is it's the perfect cover for the creation of tornadoes by this weaponry they have, okay? And this weaponry is the creation of these torsion fields that literally make things weightless. Have you noticed how it can pick up a semi-truck and put it down somewhere 2 miles away without even being damaged? It's literally like it. The whole concept of density and weight is just suspended because it is a form of levitation that is created by the creation of these torsion fields, by the bouncing of these scalar wave weapons off of the firmament to strategic places where they energize these storms and electrify these storms to create the maximum amount of damage and havoc, so they can tell all of you and I that we've got to get out of our cars, that we can't have wood-burning fireplaces, that we can't burn natural gas, that we can't burn oil, that we can't burn petroleum, that we can't have any type of products in our lives that create what they call quote-unquote CO2, including our children who breathe it out. Because they're telling us that according to their fake science and the lies that are coming out of the mouths and the lying lips of the people in the educational system and in the media and in the colleges and even in the Boy Scouts and the churches now, about how climate change is the #1 threat to the human race and to our world. When in fact, the #1 threat to our world is the creation of weaponized idiots through the school systems that have created two classes of people: the people who believe the lies and then the people who create the weapons. And so consequently, legislation continues to be scripted, typed up, roll off the printer, and passed in these houses and legislative bodies all over the country, banning and restricting the furtherance of our quality of life by demonizing and making illegal things that are absolutely necessary for our survival, like fire, okay? Whether it's inside an internal combustion engine, whether it's inside a wood-burning stove, whether it's inside a fireplace, whether it's inside a gas water heater, whether it's inside a coal-fired coal slurry power plant, whether it's inside a power plant running on natural gas, whether it's inside a power plant running on petroleum, whether it's inside the oven in a steel mill, it's all being demonized and attempted to be banned. Because what they've done is they've created all these weapons that they've hidden from us, and they bounce them off of a roof that they've hidden from us, from a roof that they've energized by programs that they've hidden from us. And they just make these target acquiring weapons come to life in the midst of these storms that they create through the manipulation of the jet streams to wreak havoc and ruin lives for maximum effect and a psychological warfare operation called climate change. So they can totally re-engineer our society into the Hunger Games. And that's where we're at, folks. And you want to know something? You know who's responsible for this? Everybody that goes along with it. You need to understand, folks, you know, Tesla, I think it was in 1905, he had wireless light bulbs. The guy put these towers together with these coils in them, and he was able to harness tremendous amounts of energy, electrical energy, you know, literally, you know, gigawatts of energy, millions of volts he could harness through, literally through the ether and the ground, right? Coming up from the earth and making a circuit with the sky, the firmament, right? There's a tremendous amount of energy that is being harvested, even to this day, that is being harvested by those who run things while they make us pay for it as they run it through wires, right? All the old buildings that were destroyed by Churchill and the United States military during World War II in Europe, many of those old, they quote, Gothic, quote unquote, Gothic buildings were energy harvesters, folks, made out of stone, piezoelectric quartz, and all kinds of amazing, stonework and resonance capabilities for healing and a source of electrons instead of the metabolism of carbohydrates and the Krebs cycle for the electron release. People were getting it from the grounding, right, and the earthing and the energy from these structures. But now what they've done is they've taken a technology that has been around since antiquity, through the golden age of humanity that's already come and gone, that's been dead and buried by the destructive forces of these psychopaths that have been unleashed. And now they've weaponized it to destroy all that is good and natural, and they've turned God's weather and God's delivery of life-giving rain into cover for a weapons deployment and a clandestine warfare being waged on innocent people, men, women, and children who are literally at work or sitting in a classroom or sitting in a restaurant as the roof gets ripped off and they get sucked up and spun around and impaled by a 2x4 or laying on a telephone pole underneath 3 or 4 cars. The most horrific, abusive, psychopathic weather modification manipulation you can imagine is being waged and conducted right now. And it is very obvious how it's being done. Now, let me tell you something, folks. Let me tell you what's been missing for the entire winter in Southern California. Oh, we've had rain. But by and large, the weather is, it's totally manipulated, because in years past, in normal weather patterns, we would have cold air come down from the Gulf of Alaska occasionally. And these cold fronts, they'd wind up, and the tail of these things would stretch anywhere from Portland all the way to Rosarita Beach off the West Coast, 1,500 miles, right? And there would be a subtropical component of this moisture that would come in, just south of the Hawaiian Islands and hook up with this cold weather pattern. And you would have the merging of a cold weather mass and a warm weather mass, and you would get something in Southern California, which is a very strange phenomenon. And I think some of you might have seen this phenomenon in your life. It's called lightning. Okay? What has been absent this entire winter is thunder and lightning. They talk about all these quote-unquote atmospheric rivers that came into California. There was no thunder and lightning over Southern California because they literally moved the cold air mass down so far that all of the warm air mass did not have a chance to connect with it. And they moved the cold air masses down so far to the south so they would stay on a trajectory so far to the south as they went from west to east. And that cold air mass would come in contact with the warm air masses from the Gulf, and that would move north and turn into these cells that have turned your life into a living hell. And that is what has gone on, folks. Total weather modification. All right? This is a big problem. I'm not saying to go, live underground, but folks, don't fall for it. Yeah, I hope y'all got insurance. I hope y'all survive these things. I don't have a solution, because when they play games like this is way too big for me to come up with any way to solve the problem, other than the fact that exposing it for what it is and why it's happening, and laying the blame at those that are using this weaponry on us to further an agenda of fraud and genocide, because that's what it is, ladies and gentlemen. And look, they can create earthquakes. They can create volcanic eruptions. There was a massive, I might as well say this. When I was a child, I used to love to watch The Twilight Zone. I used to love to watch unsolved mysteries like, quote unquote, In Search Of, right? Where, they had these things they supposedly didn't have the answers for. And I remember in Tunguska in the old Soviet Union, I think it was around the turn of the century, there was something that happened over there that created this giant crater and leveled trees for, I don't know, 800 miles, like laid them down, right? Massive, impact of some sort in massive crater, and trees were just laid flat for hundreds of miles in a radius, a circumference around it. And there was nothing in the crater. And then you can research this. I have some books from firsthand accounts of what took place in that time. People were able to read their newspapers at night because the sky was glowing, right? All over Europe. There were accounts of how like the Fix song, Red Skies at Night, right? And so we know that it was an electromagnetic event. And I can tell you right now, this is about the time that Tesla was tinkering around. And I think it was one of their weapons that may have been tested. And they chose a remote location to deploy this scalar wave. And that was the target. And that tremendous amount of energy was released. And there was no debris field. There was no debris. It wasn't a UFO. It wasn't a quote-unquote meteor. It was a scalar weapon, folks. It was a man-made phenomenon. The Tunguska event was an electromagnetic scalar event created by Tesla technology at the hands of people who probably stole the technology from him. And his intentions were to use it for good. And they always use things for evil because why? They are their father, the devil, ladies and gentlemen. So they always try to make things out to be a mystery when it's very, very simple in terms of what the cause was, because the effect is obvious. They have the same technology today, 100 years later, with computerization and everything else. They can literally move around like a magic wand, and they can energize certain storms. You see on these so-called Doppler images of the weather systems. I was always fascinated what they called satellite images, which are really nothing more than ground-based radar imprints, and they just make it look like you're seeing it from the top instead of the bottom. But in a lot of this weather modification, you'll see these cyclonic weather systems that will rotate. They'll go counterclockwise, and they'll have a tail on them. But you'll see a right angle in there. You'll see this right angle, a 90-degree angle. Instead of it being rounded, it's squared off. So they're working it, okay? And they have these weapons that could literally, blast stuff apart. They could bounce it off the roof or hit it from the ground, folks. But the point is all of this stuff, unfortunately, you can't trust anything you see on television. You can't trust anyone that tells you anything on television. And you can't trust anything you're being taught in school, okay? And the reason why we had all these defense contractors making all these inventions, and all you people made a good living, making a six-figure income 20 and 30 and 40 years ago, and you're able to go out and have $150 dinners with your wife and friends and get drunk all the time like all these people I knew growing up, is because you were making the weapons, okay? You were making the bombs. You were making the computer systems. You were making the aircraft that were delivering the weapons, right? Because they are turning us all into the new Palestinians, folks. That's what they're doing, all right? And so all of you that are listening to the sound of my voice, you better get ready to start exposing the lies and not falling for the lies and not giving up your toasters or your steel-belted radials. And you should be mad as hell, okay? And you shouldn't take it anymore, okay? You need to understand their plans, folks. They want us back on the plantation, out of our cars, into a cage with a VR headset hooked up to an intravenous drip, watching cartoons on your black scrying mirror, eating bugs, where you'll own nothing and be happy because you'll just be drugged and medicated, right? That's not the future that God has planned for his children, all right? Don't fall for this scam, folks, because I'm going to tell you something. This is the heist of the century right now. 9/11 was the crime of the century, like the Supertramp album was titled. And if you pull the sleeve out of Breakfast in America, when 9/11 went down, it was Breakfast in America. And if you pull the sleeve out of the Breakfast in America album, you could see out the plane window in the sleeve of the album was Manhattan, and you could see it going right at the Trade Center. I'm not making this up. 1979, the year Bibi Netanyahu coined the term the War on Terror. I'm not making this up, folks. This is all true, and it's all real. And this nightmare is not going to end unless you wake up from it. Okay? Climate change is real, but it has nothing to do with anything but their weaponry. CO2 is plant food, folks. The more carbon dioxide that gets into the atmosphere, the better the plants grow. Just ask anybody that runs greenhouses, especially the ones that are being hidden from the police. Okay? All right. I'm not eating the bugs. I'm not turning in my guns, and I'm not giving up my okay? And neither should you. This is Joe Imbriano, coming to you in the name of Jesus Christ. En el nombre de Jesucristo. Con el poder del Espíritu Santo. And we'll take the protection and the wisdom and the courage that is afforded to us by the gift that was given to us freely. We must be wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. Have you ever had a dove in a cage? My daughter rescued one a few years back, and it was eaten by a cat, and she kept it and nursed it back to health. And boy, you stick your finger in that cage, and that dove will really poke you hard. Okay? It's got a sharp beak. They're as gentle as can be. When you corner it, man, you better watch out. It'll put a hole in you. That's how we got to be, folks. We got to be peaceful and loving and truthful, but when it comes time to defend ourselves, we need to fight back. Okay? All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another broadcast of the Fullerton Informer. Joe Imbriano, PO Box 4121, Fullerton, California 92834, on the web at thefullertoninformer.com, WiFiDangers.com, VaxDangers.com, CellTowerDangers.com, 5GDangers.com, coming to you in the name of truth at a time where time is of the essence, folks. Redeem the days, for the days are evil, folks. Let's go in Jesus' name, and no amen, raw priesthood closing statements, okay? Take care.